Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum and very good morning to everyone. Today I'm going to discuss on a new topic called chapter 2, where in our last class or our last video we talk about the demand. So today we will talk about the supply. So I think whatever you learn in supply, whatever you will learn in supply is just contradict to what you learn in the demand. Okay, and so normally we will talk about the same thing. For example, law of supply so is actually opposite to law of demand. All right, so on and so forth. Now, so let's begin our lecture today with things that we call supply. All right, and then we talk about individual versus market supply, and the last one we will talk about the what we call the law of supply. Okay, now supply is actually can be defined as the producer ability and willingness to supply different quantity of goods and services at their different possible prices and time. Alright, so the keyword here is actually willingness to supply, ability and willingness to supply. Okay, in contrast to demand, where we are talking about ability and willingness to buy. So here, if you have ability and willingness to supply, there must be a good and there must be a price. So different good will come out with the different prices. Okay, now so this supply can be divided into two. First is individual supply, and secondly is a market supply. So individual supply refers to the supply of goods and services from one seller or single seller. All right, and as for the market supply, it is supply that can be derived by horizontal summation of all individual supply curve. Okay, so if we have three sellers, so if you sum all the quantity supplied by these three sellers, so it actually refers to market supply. If you have 10 supplier and you sum all quantity produced by these 10 supplier, then this is called a market supply. Now, and the most important part is actually called law of supply. So law of supply states that when the price of good itself increases, the quantity supplied for the good will increases too, vice versa. So vice versa means when the price of the good decreases, the quantity supply also decreases. And ceteris paribus means that all other things equal. Now, so normally you can see that the relationship between the price and quantity is always positive. Okay, what is the reason behind that? It is because when the price is higher, the supplier have motivation to supply more. Therefore, the quantity supplied will also increase. If the price is lower, then the quantity supplied is also lower because it demotivates the supplier to supply the goods. So the relationship between the price and the quantity supplied is always positive. And this happen only we have ceteris paribus. Now, what does it mean by ceteris paribus? Ceteris paribus means that all other things are equal. So what is the implication if the ceteris paribus does not hold? It means that the price and the quantity no longer have positive relationship. It's going to be negative or there is no relationship. Okay, so this is what we learned in the our last video. Now, so now I want to show you how we draw the individual supply curve and the market supply curve. Now, let's say we have this table here that represent the price and the quantity for seller offered by seller A and also seller B, and the summation of quantity offered by seller A and seller B for every single price that every single price level here will form what we call the market supply. Now, So let's talk about the seller A first, because we want to distinguish between individual supply versus market supply. Now, so let's take seller A as an individual. Okay. Now, do you see that when the price increased from 10 to 20, the quantity offered by the seller also increased from 5 to 7. And as the price increased from 20 to 30, the quantity also increased from 7 to 11. And then the further increase in the price will lead to the higher quantity, which is 13. And when the highest price is 50, the quantity offered by the supplier is 15. Now, relationship between the price and the quantity here is always positive. Now, if you draw a demand curve according to the price of good X and also the quantity supply of seller A, you will have the first graph there, or the first curve there, that represent the individual supply for seller A. And if you do the same for the supplier B, you will have the supply curve for the seller B. Okay. Now, if you sum the amount of good produced by or supplied by seller A and supply B for every single price level there, you will have the market supply. For example, let's say when the price is 10, the seller A offer 5, seller B offer 3. Therefore, the market supply equal to 8. When the price is 20, the seller A will offer 7, seller B will offer 4. The summation here will equivalent to 11. Now, as you do the rest, you will notice that the market supply here actually is the summation of quantity offered by seller A and seller B for every price level. And if you join all the quantity in market supply, you will have the final graph that represent the what we call market supply curve. Okay, so the idea here is the market supply is a summation of number of seller in the market. If you have 2 seller, then you sum only 2. If you have 10, then you sum 10 of them. So that's how you draw the market supply curve and also individual supply curve. Now, next thing that I want to discuss is change in quantity supplied versus change in supply. Now, on the left side is actually change in quantity supplied, and on your right side is change in supply. So I need you to circle on the left side, I need you to circle the word quantity, and as for the right side, I need you to circle the supply. So it's just to distinguish between these two. So if you want to explain what this curve, we have to mention 3 things. Number 1, definition. Number 2 is the determinant or the causes, and the third would be the movement. Okay. Now, for each of this curve, you must explain all these 3 things. Now, so let's begin with the left side, change in quantity supply. Now, definition for change in quantity supply is simply a movement along the supply curve. So the movement can be upward or downward. So you can see that there is one single curve there. There is single curve there, single supply curve that shows positive relationship between the price and the quantity. Now, for example, when the price increased from PO to P2, the quantity also increased to QO to Q2. Okay, when the price fall from PO to P1, the quantity supply also fall from QO to Q1. Therefore, the movement here is along the supply curve. Okay, however, in change in supply, it can be defined as the shift in supply curve either to right, for example S2, or to the left, for example S1. So here, the curve no longer the same. The curve will shift either to the right or to the left. Okay, what are the costs to this change in what are the determinant of, because we are talking about the item number 2, the causes or the determinant. What are the costs or determinant of change in quantity supply? Obviously, it is caused by the change in the price of good itself. For example, the quantity of chicken increase because of an increase in the price of chicken. So we're talking about the same good here. Okay. Do other thing influence the change in the quantity supply? No. the only factor that influences the change in the quantity supply is the price of the good itself. Okay, so that's why you can see that an increase in quantity QO to Q2 is actually caused by an increase in the price of the good itself, which is PO to P2. On the other hand, the change in the supply are caused by many factors. Okay, it could be number of seller, it could be increase in technology or fall in technology, it could be change in the price of a related good. Okay, so let's say we take one example, number of seller. If the number of seller increase, the supply curve will shift to the right from SO to S2. We will have the higher quantity, which is Q2. However, if the number of supply decrease from SO to S1, you will see that the quantity will fall from QO to Q1. Okay, what are the causes to the shift in the supply curve? Is it because of the price of the good itself, or because of the number of sellers, or all other factors? It is caused by all other factors. The proof is because you can see that the price remain the same, PO. So that means it is not caused by the price. It is caused by other factors. And the last thing that you need to highlight here is the movement. As we can see here on the change in supply, quantity supply, the movement actually upright or downright. Okay, so it's just a movement along the curve. However, change in the supply, actually the movement is either shift to the right, for example to S2, or shift to the left, for example S1. Moving to the next part is called determinant of supply. Okay, so there are many determinant of supply. However, I will discuss the number 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. 7, sorry, 2, 4, sorry, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7, where I exclude the number 1. Why is it? Because the number 1 is called the price determinant of supply, while the others, for example, cost, technology, change in the price of the good, they all call the non-price determinant of supply. Okay, if you want to link this discussion with the previous discussion, the price of the good itself actually represent the first curve, the left curve on the previous slide, and the others represent the right curve on the in our last slide. Okay, so let's begin with the cost and the availability of the factors of production. So as we learned in chapter 1, factor of production could be labor, could be capital, could be entrepreneur, could be land. Okay, every time we hire them, we have to pay the cost. Okay, for example, the cost of labor is called wages or salary. The cost of capital could be the interest or could be the rent. Okay, now an increase in the cost will actually influence the supplier to supply more or supply less. Okay, in this case, an increase in wages actually will increase the cost of production. And what happens next is the supplier will try to minimize the cost. Therefore, they will supply the number of workers to be employed. And in this case, the curve will shift to the left, and you can refer in our previous slide, the curve shift to the left from SO to S2. All right. And then we have the third one, change in the price of related good. The change in the prices of related good can be divided into two. First is complementary, and secondly is called substitute. Okay, what is complementary good? Complementary good is a good that used together with other good. For example, let's say we have car, we must have petrol. If we have a pen, we must have the ink. And many more. Okay, if we use the normally if we drink coffee, we must use the sugar. Therefore, sugar and coffee are what we call the complementary. On the other hand, the substitute good is the good that can be used can be used or can be that can replace the other goods. For example, if you don't like coffee, you can use tea. If you don't like chicken, you can eat beef. So it's just a substitute to another good. Okay, now let's begin with the first one that we call a complementary good. Okay, let's say that we take coffee and the coffee and tea. Coffee and sugar as a complementary good. Now, an increase in the price of coffee will lead to increase in quantity supply of coffee. That's what we learn in law of supply. Why? Because it is more profitable for them to supply coffee because the price of coffee has increased. What happened to the quantity supply for the tea? The supply for tea will decrease. Okay, why? Because it is best for them to supply more coffee rather than supply tea, as the price of coffee has increased. In this case, the relationship between the price of coffee and the quantity of tea is always negative. It's always negative. Okay, next is the price of letter good for the substitute. So let's say we talk about petrol and car. So let's say the price of car has increased. What happened to the quantity supply for the car? So for the car, the quantity supply for the car will also increase. Now what happened to the quantity supply for the petrol? Normally the supply for petrol also increase. Why? Because we use petrol together with the car. Okay, so in this case, the relationship between the price of car and the quantity of petrol is always positive. Now, the next thing that I want to discuss is level of technology. As everyone knows, technology allows you to produce more goods at a cheaper price and a faster time frame. Now, when there is an increase or improvement in technology, it actually allows you to supply more. In this case, the supply curve will shift to the right. And then we move to the next part that called government or economic policy. There are two policies that exist. Number one is called fiscal, and secondly is called monetary. However, we are not going to discuss the monetary policy. We will focus our discussion on fiscal policy. So fiscal policy is divided into two. First is tax and second is subsidy. Now, what happens if the government increase the tax? Okay, it will burden the producer. So the producer will have to bond more or to have to pay more cost. As I said earlier, the response of the producer is try to minimize the cost. So what happens? They'll start to reduce number of workers, and finally will lower the quantity of production, and this lead to the shift of the supply curve to the left. On the other hand, the subsidy allow the producer to produce goods at the lower price. Therefore, it encourage producer to produce more goods, and this actually will shift the curve to the right. Okay. And next is called producer expectation about future price. When we talk about expectation, it means something that happened in the future. So let's say today, by 12 midnight, the price of petrol will increase. So what will the producer do beforehand? Okay, so normally when he expects the price of petrol will increase tomorrow, what will he do today is he will start to reduce amount of petrol to be supplied. Therefore, the supply curve shift to the left. Why is it? Because it is more profitable for him to produce petrol tomorrow rather than producing it today. How about if producer expect the price of petrol will decrease tomorrow? So it's best for him to produce more today. Therefore, the supply curve will shift to the right. Okay, the last determinant of supply is called number of supplier. So number of suppliers says that the higher the supplier, the higher the quantity can be supplied. Therefore, the curve will shift to the right. The reason behind this is because the higher the number of supplier, meaning that there are many factory that can produce goods in the market, so this actually allow them to increase the quantity supply. And finally, the supply curve shift to the right. Okay, the last part of this slide is called exceptional supply. Now, exceptional supply only happen in the labor market. It does not happen in the good market. Good market means you buy and supply goods. Here we are talking about buy and supplying the labor. So in good markets, normally we have the normal law of supply, or we call normal supply. Well, it says the higher the price, the higher the quantity. However, in the labor market, we have exceptional supply that says the higher the price, the lower the quantity. Exactly like demand, except here we are talking about the supply. Now, since we use word here exceptional, meaning that it is contrary to the law of supply. Okay, now what happened here is, before we talk about the exceptional supply, it is best to look at this graph, where the graph is divided into two sections. First, it is WO and below. Okay, it is called substitution effect. I simply call it the bottom area. And WO and above, for example W2, it is called income effect, or simply I call the top area. Now, where is the normal law of supply? The normal law of supply can be located in the bottom area. Why? Because it says that the higher the price, the higher the quantity. This can be proved. For example, when the wage increase from W1 to WO, you can see that the quantity of working hours increase from W1 from H1 to HO. So relationship is positive. Okay. Why we include wages? Because wages is the price of the labor. Okay, so because now we are talking about the labor market. Now, so I can say that normally the higher the wages, the more the working hours that we want to offer. However, after WO, for example, after WO, what happened here? The higher the wages, actually the lower the supply of working hours. For example, when the wages increase from WO to W2, the working hours fall from HO to H2. This is actually called the exceptional supply. Why? Because the higher the price, which is the wages, the lower the quantity of services to be supplied. Okay, which is only H2 as contrary to the H0. Okay, I think that's it for our lecture today. Alright, so hopefully that you will get some idea about the supply, and they are useful, especially when we want to explore the next chapter called elasticity. That's it. Thank you everyone, and see you again.